Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's UDC Library webinar. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. The ethical issues of AI. This is the final webinar in our spring series all about AI. My name is Megan Kowalski. I'm the Outreach and Reference Librarian for the UDC Library, and I'll be hosting today's session. First, I need to give credit to Matthew Turner. He is our field placement student from the University of Maryland, and he created the content for today's event. He's unable to be here today, but I want to thank him and give him credit for all the hard work he put into today's session. So today's webinar is being recorded and you will be sent a link after the event. All of our previous webinars from this series and any webinars we have hosted in the past are also available on our YouTube page. We will also have time for questions at the end, both recorded and unrecorded, so feel free to drop those in the chat as we go. My colleague Jacob Hopkins will be monitoring the chat for me, but I will also keep an eye on it as well. The AI field is constantly and rapidly changing, and there are now thousands of tools available. In fact, there is an AI tool called There's an AI for that, which helps you find AI tools. So, on top of choosing which tool is best suited for a particular task, there is also the added complication of ethical concerns behind using these products. And we should take these concerns into account before, during, and after using these AI tools. And doing so will help us use this technology in a more informed, responsible, and sustainable way. Today, we'll focus on issues of environmental and health impacts, biases, and some legal concerns surrounding these tools. And these concerns arise in the creation of AI, while using AI, and also in the final products created by AI. And so you can start asking questions about ethics before you even choose an AI tool. The most basic question to start with is, do I even need AI to complete this task? Just because AI is an option doesn't mean you should A, have to use it, or B, that it's even the best tool for the job. So ask yourself, what is my intention of using AI here? And is there an alternative? Not using AI at all is the simplest way to avoid ethical issues, but these tools can be extremely helpful. Realistically, many of us will use AI tools in one way or another. So what should we consider? We're going to dig into more of the specific ethical concerns about that throughout this webinar. Two of the major ethical concerns of using AI amount to the amount of resources needed for these tools to operate and the impact they have both on our world and our health. AI relies on data centers, and these are the facilities that house the infrastructure needed to support the energy intensive workloads that go into AI. A recent finding suggests that by the year 2026, the electricity consumption of these data centers is expected to approach over 1,000 terawatts, which will put data centers in between the countries of Japan and Russia in terms of overall electricity use. And that's just from the data centers, not everything else that goes into it. And so further, it takes an enormous amount of energy to train these AI tools. Training AI models consumes thousands of megawatt hours of electricity, which emits hundreds of tons of carbon into the air. It's estimated that by 2030, training a single leading edge AI model could demand power output equivalent to 8 nuclear reactors. In fact, some companies are actually paying to bring nuclear power plants back online to help support the level of energy AI needs to work. And we have to admit, some researchers do claim that energy costs have been overestimated, and there are some companies that are creating more sustainable AI models and looking to implement cleaner sources of energy. However, even if companies are making more environmentally sustainable AI models, its remaining impact on the environment is not equitable across the globe. Pollution and resource scarcity disproportionately affect developing countries and regions and communities already vulnerable to the harms of climate change. For example, in 2022, A Google data center in Finland operated on 97% carbon free energy. This is fantastic. But that number is much lower for Asian data centers. Just 4 to 18% of the energy needed to operate those data centers was carbon free. AI data centers also consume other limited resources, such as fresh water to run the cooling systems. Data centers, create a lot of heat. And so to cool them down to keep them operating, a lot of water goes into the cooling systems. And using a single prompt in an AI tool is like pouring the equivalent of a 16-ounce water bottle out on the ground. And that's just a simple prompt. So if you're putting something complex in there, it's going to use a lot more water. Additionally, many of these data centers are being built in deserts, places that are already starved for fresh water needed for agriculture and human consumption. Many AI servers also require minerals and other rare earth materials, which are often mined unsustainably. The labor to extract these minerals falls on countries with harsh labor practices and extremely low wages. These data centers can also add noise pollution to the surrounding environment. Even here in DC, neighboring Northern Virginia, where a lot of data centers are located, residents are pushing back against this loud AI hum that is now existent 24/7 in their communities. They state that the noise and this constant, hum that's around them results in lost sleep, increased stress, decreases in overall well-being, and other impacts on businesses that they must now compete for limited resources and funds. Furthermore, many of these communities may not have had a say in where the data centers are located or in how they operate. On top of that, these data centers take relatively few people to operate, so they don't even come with the benefit of increased local hiring. And we know that staying up to date on the environmental and health impacts of AI can feel nearly impossible, but it's important to acknowledge that these tools are energy and resource hungry. Another key question to ask yourself before using an AI tool is who owns it? Much of our existing AI technologies are owned by big tech companies like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. So, why is this important? The more these companies have shares in the AI sector, the more influence they will have over governmental policy decisions on both a local and national scale. This can have drastic effects on environmental resource allocation, privacy concerns, and other ethical issues. For example, OpenAI, the company responsible for ChatGPT, grants Microsoft licenses in exchange for use of the company's computing power. This means that Microsoft is a key player in one of the most widely used AI tools. These tech companies all have different levels of privacy protection, commitments to sustainability, and they don't make this information easy to find or even to understand. So it can be useful to look around at the AI tools webpage to find out which companies actually own it and which groups are actually supporting them. Then with a little Googling, we can find more information about the company's policies regarding these key ethical issues. And admittedly, this can be tedious and time consuming, but overall, most companies will have some questionable ethical practices and standards in some form that you may want to consider. So, why does this happen? Well, profits from shareholders come first. The ethics and impact are just not something that is forefront in these companies' minds. They are training to make these AI tools sustainable money-making operations. And so what we can do to consider our own use is make the best informed decision we can before we go into using these AI tools. And ownership doesn't just refer to the technology of AI itself. It also means who owns the content the AI was trained on and who owns the content the AI generates. Gen AI in particular raises significant copyright concerns. These tools are trained on massive collections of information, both in the public domain and copyrighted. These materials were harvested from the internet without the original creator's permission or compensation. And there are several lawsuits in the works where creators are trying to be compensated for the use of their work in training these AI models. Others are also fighting to have their material, removed from these training data sets, but the genie's kind of out of the lamp on that. So they're trying to do the best they can to at least make future models no longer trained on their work. And what has happened is these AI companies have just chosen to do things and beg forgiveness later. They figure at this point they're so big and it's too late for anything to go into compensating the original creators. And because the training data for AI models may include copyrighted materials, the AI generated content itself also has the potential to be a part of copyright infringement. If you can tell AI to speak like your favorite author or talk like your favorite musician, that output could be copyrighted. The US Copyright Office has stated that content generated by AI tools generally cannot be copyrighted because human authorship is required for copyright protection. It's all very messy because is a prompt a human enough authorship? Law and legal policy are very slow to adapt to new technology. I mean, some of these companies are still trying to figure out social media, and that's been around for decades now. And so AI is far outpacing our existing laws, and the AI companies are kind of counting on that because it means they can move fast and break things without real consideration for existing law or how the law might be applied to them. And so it's not expected for the general user to understand the ins and outs of copyright law. It is extremely complicated. In fact, many tech companies count on that. They just want you using their product. And so if you're unsure about this, ask one of our librarians and we will do best in our ability to help you. We're not lawyers, but we can at least point you in the right direction. And so one more major ethical concern to consider before you use a Gen AI tool is my information kept private? And how is my information protected? AI tools, especially ones that are free for you to use, often harvest information from their user, increasing the risk of a breach of your personal and sensitive data. Your prompts, including any data you may upload or profiles you create, may be and most likely are being shared with the tool's training data set. And while this data harvesting is meant to deepen the AI's training data and improve its responses and give you an individualized experience, it also happens automatically and usually without your explicit consent. And who reads those policy documents at the start before you use something? From start to finish, most people don't. They just click that checkbox and say, I'm good to go, let me in. And this kind of data harvesting can lead to re-identification. And that's the process of matching anonymized data back to specific individual people. AI can analyze patterns, combine data sets, and infer identities from what would seem to be anonymous information. Privacy policies for some generative AI tools even allow the AI developers to then sell their users' personal and sensitive information to third parties. Like most things online, if you are not paying for it, then you yourself are the product being sold. And so you should read each tool's privacy policy to understand how your personal data is collected, used, stored, and protected. It's a good practice to periodically review these policies as they may change abruptly. And since that's a lot of work, please consider visiting our AI help guide, where we link to privacy policies of some of the major and most popular AI tools. And so, what do we do with all of this in mind? We can ask ourselves, is the reason I want to use AI worth the amount of resources the AI tool needs to complete it? Can we use something else instead, like a search engine, a library catalog, or just a simple database? Most current uses of Gen AI are actually just information searches, simple planning events, or conversational therapy for which Google or another tool, another non-AI tool would work just as well. And so let's decide that, using an AI tool is the best course of action for what you want to do. This may happen. I myself use AI tools. What further ethical considerations should we consider while we are actually using these tools? Something to consider while and after using these AI tools is that they can and in fact are biased. For example, they can and will produce information based on stereotypes. These tools are ultimately human made and humans are biased. Gen AI was trained on those biases. This training reflects all of the discriminations and injustices our society, created in making this content that the AI tool was trained on. AI can learn and will replicate those biases in its responses and will produce results that are racist, sexist, homophobic, ableist, or otherwise discriminatory. In fact, the more you talk to a Gen AI tool, the more likely it is to sound like the worst parts of the internet. Furthermore, of the people working in the AI field, approximately 70% identify as male, and the vast majority are white. These statistics mean that the algorithms used to build AI models tend to favor certain outcomes, behaviors, and group of people and exclude or disadvantage others. A study from just this past month, March 2024, found that AI generated images of women tended to show them younger and more docile, while those of men were shown to be older and a little bit more aggressive looking. Even if nuanced, these biases can be detrimental since they play into established gender stereotypes. The media outlet Wired tested AI's video generation software Sora. They found that, quote, everyone is good looking. Pilots, CEOs, and college professors are men, while flight attendants, receptionists, and childcare workers are women. Disabled people are wheelchair users. Interracial relationships are tricky to generate, and fat people don't run. End quote. These journalists found it was even difficult to get Sora to produce less biased results, even when they tried. For example, when prompting the tool to produce videos of an interracial black and white couple, the videos tended to still show same race, and heterosexual couples. Furthermore, in images generated by AI, women are almost uniformly shown as white and thin. Gen AI textual responses also favor the idea that women are solely responsible for parenting and the work of the home. Again, reinforcing that those biases that existed in the data sets they were trained on. And since Gen AI can favor groups with more privilege as the default, this can perpetuate harmful stereotypes about minoritized groups, or it will simply exclude them from the results entirely. And so it's important to remain critical of AI generated content and to compare AI responses with other sources and perspectives to get a full scope of use of these tools. And so, similar to producing results with biases, AI can and will produce flat out incorrect information. Even simple questions like how many R's are in the word strawberry will produce incorrect results. We won't go into detail about how to evaluate AI generated results in this webinar because we've done a session on that, but it's important to remember to fact check. But take everything you see that comes out of AI with a grain of salt because it could just be flat out wrong or misleading. As a quick summary, we can evaluate AI results by consulting trusted external sources, such as journal articles, well-known websites and books. Heck, even your own existing knowledge can help you show where AI is getting something wrong. If we don't use AI tools critically, we are at risk of spreading misinformation ourselves, and that can be dangerous. And so, if you're interested in learning more about evaluating AI in particular, go to our YouTube page. We have our Evaluating AI webinar available for you to watch. And that's just up for you 24/7 to access. And so, what happens after we use AI? Once the AI tool gives you a response to a prompt, you can ask yourself, did the benefits of using this tool outweigh my ethical concerns? That's just something to consider. If you have a lot of concerns, it might be best not to use AI at all. You can also ask yourself, did I really need to use AI for this task? I admittedly sometimes use Gen AI when I'm feeling lazy. And I have a little bit of regret about that. And so maybe I should look into my own practices to think, what else could I have done, you know, without using AI here? You can also ask, is another tool more suitable? Sometimes AI is just not the right tool for the job. Once you have something out of AI, you can ask, are there any biases in the responses? And can you counteract them with other information? You can ask yourself, what can I do differently next time? And then, did I actually get what I needed? Sometimes AI is going to spit things at you, and you're going to think, wait, this isn't what I needed or asked for at all. Again, it's a tool, so we have to treat it as such. And so asking ourselves these questions can help us be more ethical users of AI in the future. And so we know there's a lot to think about when considering the ethical implications of using AI tools. And this is only going to grow as AI gets built into more and more things. So there are many ways to contact us. If you have any questions, we do not pretend to be experts at all. We are learning with everyone here. But because we get asked so many questions, we're more than happy to help send you in the right direction on these questions. And speaking of questions, now is the time we'll take questions from you all. Feel free to drop them in the chat, or if you prefer, you can unmute yourself. We will also have time for unrecorded questions at the end. I see a comment in the chat. This was great. Thank you. I learned a lot. Great. Thank you for attending. This is something, we are not anti-AI at the library. In fact, we think it's a great tool for some things, but these are all things that are going through our head. I personally, when I go to taking my water bottle here and upending it on the ground. And if the answer is no, then I move on. Okay, one more minute before I end the recording to allow for unrecorded questions. Right, not seeing anything else come in. I want to thank you again for attending today, and I will allow time now for unrecorded questions.